With the birth rate conversation happening again, I've been starting to really think about the reasons why I decided to be child-free. And while I don't owe anyone an explanation for my decisions, I think it's important to understand the origins of your decisions and the reasons why, because when you do, it allows you to make better decisions going forward. I wish this was something that people who decided to have children did as well. I wish they really thought about and distilled their reasons so they truly understood why they wanted to become parents. But they don't, because marriage, motherhood, it's the default, right? So the surface reasons are economic, right? When I was in my early 20s, I didn't really think about having kids. It didn't even really occur to me until I was in a relationship with someone who couldn't imagine their life without them. He had this very fairy tale idea of family. And then so I started looking into, okay, well, I'm going to work. I'm never going to not work. I will never be a stay-at-home mom. That I'd never considered. So I'm like, okay, well, what happens when I go back to work? What does childcare cost? Am I going to be able to get maternity leave? Depending on the job I have, it's not mandated in the United States. What happens if the kid gets sick? I'm gonna have to leave work. Do I have to hire a nanny? What happens when the nanny is sick or the kid is sick and I have to stay home? But then people say, oh, when they're in school, it gets better. Oh yeah, okay, well, they're only in school 9 months out of the year. So what happens during the summer? What do you do with them in the summer? I have to hire a full-time nanny. Oh, no, you can put them in summer programs. Okay, what does that cost? And on and on and on and on. What does college cost? What does basic upkeep, food, shelter, clothing, all those incidentals for children, what do those things cost? And I knew what those cost because I was a child once. And for a time in there, my parents struggled financially. And I realized just how expensive having children was. And it hit me when I was very young. My parents' lives would be much easier if my sister and I weren't there. They would have had a lot less problems because their lives would have been much less expensive. Now, I never felt any kind of way about that because I know my parents wanted me. They are meticulous planners. They planned to get married. They wanted to have 2 children. They got married. They had 2 kids. Boom, boom. They're very responsible people who knew exactly the kind of life they wanted to live and made all the decisions to make sure that that's the life they had and did the best they could to make that life good for everybody involved. And I did see that the stress that being a full-time worker outside the home and being a mother put on my mom. And it wasn't pretty. Her health was permanently affected by the stress of financial troubles, working full-time, dealing with kids, and doing most of the domestic work. Because although my dad did laundry, I don't think he really did much of anything else. And still to this day, they're retired and still living in California and where I was born. And when I'm on the phone with my mother, almost every single time, at least a couple of times, it's like, hey, that doesn't go there. Or, hey, why did you leave that open? Or, hey, can you clean that up, please? They've been married over 50 years and she still has to constantly tell him to do things. They've lived in the same house forever. They've lived in this house, the particular house they live in. They've lived in that house for 25 years. So the weaponized incompetence, all that stuff is still there. That never really went away. I'm sure it was worse at one time, but it never went away because my dad was raised by a housewife who did everything for him. He came from one of those families where the boys were coddled and the girls were not. How do I know this? Because that's the exact same way that all my cousins were raised. And as much as my parents might like to claim that it would have been different if one of their children were a boy, I'm not so sure it would have been. But we'll never know. But even if all those things weren't true, say money wasn't a concern, childcare, leave, all those things, those economic considerations weren't a concern, I thought to myself, under those circumstances, would I want to be a mother? So I thought about it, and then I realized the answer is still no. Because even if all those other economic things, those problems are solved, here's the one thing about motherhood, the problem that you can't really solve. Because this even happens to rich women. Granted, the labor load is different, and the labor that, wealthy wives do, it's a different kind of labor because they hire people to do the dirty work, the domestic labor, the diaper changing, all that stuff. But there's still other work that you do when you're married to a man with children. It doesn't matter whether you're rich or poor. When you become a mother, you become a different person. Mentally, spiritually, if you believe in that, biologically, your DNA, your body is permanently altered by birthing a child. part of you dies during that process. And it's not an insignificant part, it's a big part. And I never understood why so many women kind of are very blasé about that. They kind of take it with a grain of salt. They basically, half of yourself dies, not immediately when you become a mother, but over time. You surrender a part of yourself, a huge part of yourself that the fathers don't ever have to surrender. And it always seems like the part of yourself you have to surrender is the best part. The parts you're the most proud of. Your name, your work, your dreams. So after you've done countless years, months, hours of labor, half of yourself dies. Then on the back end, you're disrespected and disregarded by the very people that you surrendered half of yourself in order to serve. Those are the people that always end up doing you dirty in the end. So the very people you sacrificed everything for, it means nothing to them. Your sacrifice is unacknowledged, disregarded. A lot of kids don't even say thank you to their mothers. Now, I'm not including people who have toxic, narcissistic parents. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about run-of-the-mill, average, mainstream parents and their kids. And more often than not, you end up economically insecure, unhealthy, sad, sometimes even financially destitute, depending on the circumstances. So you gave all that up to be a mother. You gave up yourself to be a mother. But men do not have to give up themselves to be a father. So maybe I was right to begin with about my reasons for not wanting to become a mother. The price you pay to do it. Because the real price you pay is yourself. And like every other thing involving children, it's too high a price to pay.